What's up, tutorial heads? Now, I'm sure you have all heard this. You should study the masters. If you want to improve your art, you need to study the masters, the true masters. Study artists who are just above and beyond in every aspect and just acquire from their skills and their knowledge. So today we're going to do a master study. So let's go over to our master study. This is by Reddit user NME, I believe is their username, is the master that created this piece. This is the Sasuke piece. So today we're gonna study it as if it's a master study. So I'm going to drop down the opacity on this, and we're just going to analyze, how did the masters make the marks that they made and why. So instead, like, normally you would think like, okay, well, you're going to trace, like, just trace every line. Like, if you just trace every line, like, no, you don't want to do that. What we're going to do is we're going to actually analyze, like, the forms and the construction of this masterpiece. So we're going to take a circle for the head. And we're just going to put that right about there. And that looks about right. Let's bump up the opacity here. Set a circle for the head, and then we have sort of our directional lines, which appear to be, maybe he's looking a little bit down, about like that. And so this is kind of our angle. We have the chin, which kind of goes like that, and then we have our neck, which goes like that, and we want to think of these as shapes. So, like, back of the head, of course, goes like that, and then the ear is near the back of the head, so it's like that, and we have our little ear. And then we want to, let me actually increase this a bit. There we go. Okay, so let's analyze here. So each eye is kind of like a rectangle shape, kind of like a pair of glasses. I'm going to assume that is about where the eyes are. So the eye sockets are about like this. So just analyzing the shapes, and then you have the nose, it comes down, and it kind of makes this sort of like a wedge shape, and then the glabella, of course, is going to be about like that. And then we have the mouth, which is a very thick rectangle looking like that. So I assume the lower lip is here and the upper lip is like here. Unless these are the lips, in which case this would be the lower lip, and we would have this sort of lip construction there. So for the hair, we have this sort of repeating, like, jagged shape. So we're going to go ahead and do that. So we have this sort of repeating triangle shapes. And as far as line weight goes, we want to copy, if we want to be just like the master, we want to make our line weight all over the place. So we have kind of just these really thin lines that make up the focus, the focus points of the image, like where the viewer is going to look is where we want to have like very thin lines. And then for the outside, outside the focal point is where we want to have our thickest lines, especially in the background. And then on the top, we kind of just have this line that goes straight back like that. And that's about it for the head. Then we have sort of this clothing item, sort of like a cylinder. And we have this little fold lines here. And then for the torso, we have like just kind of like a burrito shape. So here is our analysis. And now if we do away with the analysis for a minute, and let's bump this up. And as I've said, we have just the very, very thin lines that sort of make up the focal point. And that's what we want to try to emulate. If we want to emulate this master, because this is truly a stunning piece here. So let's see, back to the construction lines. So what you want to do is you want to kind of study the construction and learn from the construction of the master. We're not exactly tracing the whole image and then claiming it as our own. We're more just kind of deconstructing and figuring out, like, okay, maybe there's some indication of eyebrows here and here. We're just kind of figuring out like what went where and how it fit, and sort of reconstructing. So after you've reconstructed, what you want to do is you want to put the image aside to one side and kind of just draw it from reference. So we have this like right, it's like this shape, and then it kind of goes back, and then we have this you want to draw it once from reference to sort of really hammer it in. Hammer in the knowledge that we gain from studying this. So then we have the ear back here. Let's see. And we have these sort of spiky shapes. And then a thin spiky shape there. And it goes back. And then up a bit. And then we kind of just have this repeating pattern. And then we have this sort of long strand, and then one more long strand like that. Or no, it actually comes down like that. Now it looks like I've actually misplaced that a little bit, so let's fix that. There we go. And then we want to place the nose, which is sort of let's show our guidelines here. Okay, so the nose is about at the halfway point of the head, so it's going to be bottom of the circle is about right there. So about right here is where the nose starts, and it kind of comes down, and then like that. I can erase. Okay, and then we have the eyes, I suppose, or the glabella actually comes way over on this side. Way over on this side. And then it only goes a little bit on that side, so. Then we have the eyes, which are just kind of rectangles. Or actually, they kind of go like that. Looks like I've kind of messed up the placement here of this strand, because it actually comes forward way more. There we go, that's more like it. And we kind of have the pupil. And a bit of an indication of the eyebrow. And then over here we have some eyebrow. And then this eye. And then we kind of have the eyes doing, kind of pointing outward. Because this is a real master. They really know what they're doing, so it's important to learn sort of how they do it, so that we can improve. Let me get rid of this and this. And then we kind of just have a line like that. And then you can kind of compare so if I take this and put this on a new layer, and then I drag this over here, you can kind of compare for your first attempt. So if I shrink that down a bit, I kind of made it out of scale because I'm not using a viewfinder or anything like that. So it looks like I made the eyes a bit too far apart, so let's correct that a bit. And then this strand of hair came way too far back. And it looks like I made the mistake of making the back of the head. So this looks like a pretty easy fix here. Let me just fix this up. There we go. Much better. So once you've drawn it once, you can see where you went wrong, then you can kind of hide the reference. And then you're gonna draw the same thing again, and this is where you really drive home the key points in the master study. So we have this line that kind of goes back for the hair. Oh right, I need to draw the chin. Neck. Then we have our eyes. And of course one is going to be slightly lower, because the master kind of has this way of manipulating symmetry to achieve the effect that they kind of achieve. So really fascinating stuff. Eye sockets, eyebrows, and then we can kind of get rid of this. Maybe this one is going to be a bit more like that. So he's kind of looking that way with his right eye, and he's kind of looking that way with his left eye. His left, not our left. And that's going to achieve the effect of this like really appealing effect that this artist, the master, kind of came up with. And the head shape is kind of very, very smushed, like, and you can see there's like no volume on top of the hair here. So we want to make sure that that's the case in our recreation. And you want to just quickly sketch it out. It's kind of like a Picasso piece. Now, if you think about it, this user NME has really kind of it's kind of like a Cubism sort of piece. If you really kind of look at it, it's like a Picasso Cubism, which is why we're kind of you know, a lot of people think like you shouldn't copy if you want to get better, and like you should develop your own style, but that's actually when you try to be unique over everything else and you don't like learn from the masters, that's when your quality kind of can start to suffer. So yeah, just kind of a quick sketch. And then you can do this as many times as you want, kind of. To, if you want to get really good at drawing this masterpiece, you would ideally draw it, you know, 3 or 4 or 5 times. That's one of the more hardcore methods of emulating a style. But yeah, it really is like a Picasso Cubism sort of piece, isn't it? And this was done by user NME while they were only 15 years old, I believe, when they made this piece, which is very impressive for such a masterpiece. Okay, I'm done. Alright, peace.